In this video, we're going to show you how to install a purpose-built Rockford Fosgate audio system. Hey everyone, I'm Eric in the Rockford Fosgate R&D lab. Today, we're going to install an RZR-14 Stage 3 audio kit in this Polaris RZR Turbo. First, let's go ahead and get started by removing the dash assembly. Once we removed the hood, we started on our dash assembly by removing these 4 Torx screws using a T40 driver. Now, we're going to move on to our upper center dash pocket and remove these 2 push pins using our extractor. Then, we'll go ahead and remove the entire dash assembly from the RZR. Now that we've got that finished, we've got our dash kit laid out onto the table. Now you'll notice there's some extra trim panels and bezels available. We're fortunate that this particular model has a center upper pocket as well as a lower center pocket. Now we're going to head back into the RZR and remove that lower pocket, and then we'll show you some really cool installation tricks with this kit. Now that we've got that done, we've got one more trim panel to remove for this video. We've got a lot of configurations here, and it's easier to show you the assembly while it's on the table itself. Okay, the cool thing about this kit is it gives you a lot of configurations to mount the radio. The PMX source unit included in this kit can be mounted in either the upper or the lower portion of the dash. For installation in the upper, use these 2 trim panels. For installation in the lower, use this trim panel and this metal bracket. Now, for future upgrades, you can also install a PMX-8 using these trim panels. Now that we covered all the configurations, we're going to show you how to install the source unit in either the upper pocket or the lower pocket. Now for the upper pocket, we're going to use the supplied hardware to connect the source unit to this inner trim panel. Then we'll connect this entire assembly to the back side of this outer trim panel. Now that we have the upper dash kit assembled, we're ready to install this into the dash itself. You'll notice at the bottom of the trim panel, there's some locking tabs. When inserting the radio, make sure that you lock those tabs in first. Okay, now we're ready to show you the optional lower pocket installation for this radio. We're going to first start with this metal bracket and this trim panel. This gets sandwiched to the dash so it secures it in place. The trim panel will be on the outside, the metal bracket will be on the inside. Now notice, the bracket has tabs on both the top and the bottom. This will go toward the dash. Once we have that assembled, we're going to secure our source unit using the supplied hardware. Now that we've covered both upper and lower mounting options for the included PMX radio, let's take a moment and talk about the included trim panel for the PMX-8. Now, this option is only designed for 2019 or newer RZRs like the model that we've got behind us. The PMX-8 features a large LCD, provisions for a backup camera, and is Sirius XM ready. Now, the only caveat is we don't include mounting brackets for the black box. However, it's pretty lightweight, so you can fabricate your own for installation up under the dash. Now we're ready to install our wiring harness. To do this, take the side with the ring terminals and from the inside, route those through the factory grommet up to the accessory wiring panel. The terminal strip is just a simple distribution block, so there's no wiring behind it. With our 10mm nut driver, simply connect the red wire to the accessory terminal and the black wire to the ground terminal. Now notice, we're not using the constant red terminal because we don't want to keep our radio on all the time. Okay, now we're ready to install our main power harness. To get started, we're going to disassemble the rest of the RZR. To do that, we're going to remove the 2 front seats and the center tunnel. Okay, as you notice, we were disassembling the RZR. We went ahead and removed the top pocket and our glove box. The top pocket is simply held in by 2 push pins at the bottom. To remove the glove box, we used a 10mm socket and removed these 2 bolts off the top. Now they are tucked up a little under the frame, so they might be hard to see. Now we're ready to install the main power harness. We're going to start in the radiator compartment, go down through the center tunnel, and back to the battery area. Now it's very tight, so to make this easier, we're going to start with the fuse end and remove the waterproof cover. We're going to follow the factory ground cable from this terminal block next to the tubular frame, then we'll go underneath the floorboard, following the factory harness back to the battery. Okay, now that we're done with that, we're ready to route our power and speaker connectors back through the factory grommet. Once we pull the harness through, leave enough slack for any connections that need to be made. Okay, now we're ready to talk about the new subwoofer enclosure. This is a cool all-new design that's ported for higher bass output. Now, if you do like a sealed box for tighter bass response, we do include this port cap that can be secured into place. Now the enclosure is going to replace your existing glove box, but we do include 2 additional screws that will secure the bottom of the enclosure to the floorboard. Now once this enclosure is mounted into place, we'll go ahead and plug in our harness and run it to the center pocket. We're ready to install the subwoofer. You'll notice that the subwoofer has 2 sets of terminals, which means it's dual voice coil, but the enclosure only has 1 set of wires. So we'll use this jumper wire to connect both voice coils together and get it properly configured. Once we get it wired, we'll load the subwoofer into the enclosure and align the holes. Then we'll secure it in place using the supplied hardware and Allen bit. Then we'll take it to the RZR and get it installed. Okay, now that we're done with that, we're ready to install our lower speaker pods. You'll notice there's two channels built into these enclosures. This is for the subframe, and this part is for the wiring harness. Now these are labeled left and right, so you'll know which one that you're installing. We're going to start off with a 1/2-inch socket and remove the lower bolt from the side of the subframe. Then we'll use this threaded standoff to replace that factory bolt. We'll use one of the threaded screws to secure the enclosure to the side of the RZR. Then we'll use this included ball head Allen with the remaining hardware to secure the enclosure to the floorboard. Once they're installed, we'll just go ahead and route our speaker harnesses to the center pocket, then zip tie them to the subframe. Okay, now we're ready to install our speakers. We're simply going to connect the positive and negative wires to these terminals. The larger terminal is positive, but they're keyed for proper polarity, so you don't need to worry about that. Then we'll use the supplied hardware and the included Allen bit to secure the speakers. Now these models included in this kit secure to the #1 holes in the lower speaker pods. Okay, now we're ready to install our amplifier kit. You'll notice the kit comes with 2 amp plates. The big one is for 2014 to 2018 RZRs that we'll cover in another video. The small one is for 2019 or newer RZRs like the one that we've got here. To get started, we're going to mount the amp plate to the subframe crossbar under the dash. Using the provided hardware, we're going to pre-tap those holes in the crossbar using our T40 Torx. Now once that's done, we're going to prepare our harnesses. On the driver's side, we're going to pull our power and speaker harnesses. On the passenger side, we're going to mount our input harness. Then we'll be ready to secure the amp plate. We're going to do that using the 2 T40 screws and then this short screw for the sub enclosure. Okay, at this point we're ready to mount our amplifier. First, we're going to remove the power plug. Our main power harness already has one supplied on it. Now, using the supplied hardware, we're going to use a 2.5mm Allen to secure the amp to the amp plate. Then remember, we're going to plug in our power and speaker outputs on the driver's side and plug in our amp input harness on the passenger side. You'll notice there's an extra hole on the amp plate. This is designed specifically for a Christmas tree zip tie that you can secure any harnesses out of the way. Okay, once the amplifier is installed, we're going to tune the amplifier. Now we have this free amp tuning guide that's downloadable in a link in the description of this video. You can also download it directly from the product details page of rockfordfosgate.com. Okay, now we're ready to make the connections between our speakers and our amplifier. The first thing we're going to do when we're up under the dash is grab our radio output harness and our amplifier output harness. Now, since we're not using the built-in amplifier from the PMX radio, we're just going to go ahead and cap these off. Then we'll make the speaker connections at our amp output harness. The front outputs go to the front left and right. Then we'll connect our blue wire to turn the amplifier on and off. Okay, now we're ready to reinstall our dash components. As you can see, we're installing the radio in the upper pocket location. The lower pocket in this vehicle is going to be reserved for some car-to-car communication. However, if you do install the PMX radio in the lower pocket, the LED that was attached to this pocket can be zip tied to an existing harness. Now, once we get the dash in place, we'll go ahead and make our electrical connections for ignition, lighting, and accessory. Okay, now we're ready to install our upper dash panel. You'll notice we finished installing those two T40 bolts for the front side of the dash in preparation. So once we move this into position, we're going to pull our main power harness and attach it to the PMX radio. Then we'll connect the RCAs. The front output from the PMX goes to the front amp input. The rear output goes to the rear amp input. Once we get this in place, we'll install our two factory push pins here and secure the top using 4 bolts and our T40 driver. All right, guys, we're in the final stretch. First, we're going to make our battery connections using a 13mm socket to reconnect our ring terminals. Then we'll connect the ground terminal back onto the battery. Then we'll go ahead and test the system and make sure that everything is operating properly. Once that's done, we'll tidy up our wiring harnesses. Now, be careful of the driveline and radiator hoses going through the center tunnel. We're going to zip tie our harness to the top following the factory wiring. Loop any excess you have near the battery and we'll keep that under the tunnel. Then we'll go ahead and finish any reassembly and get this RZR back out on the trail. As you can see, that install came together pretty easy. But if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact our technical support. They can be reached Monday through Friday at 1-800-669-9899 or through live chat at the bottom of our website at rockfordfosgate.com. Until next time, I'm Eric for Rockford Fosgate. We'll see you again soon.